Well, thank you, Alexander, Trent, Matt, for your very informative presentations. I guess I have to apologize for my voice. General Abe and I have been on a series of trips visiting implementation partners and others, and he's come through it obviously extraordinarily well, and I got nailed, but recovering. But these were important presentations. They serve as excellent examples of how access to the National Laboratory on the ISS can make a critical difference for research projects. We hope others who have seen this work will become enthusiastic and offer up competitive proposals for future flight on the station. And for the ones that were presented, we look forward to further follow-up as these projects mature, seeing what the outcomes are. And of course, if ever we can be of assistance, please call upon us at any time. And we're going to change gears a little bit in this meeting and move now from the formal presentations by management and selected investigators to what is typical, a freewheeling discussion by the members of the board. Typically, we do this in a more closed manner, and I can assure you it's usually lively and very active. We're going to do it today. You'll witness it firsthand, how this board interacts and how it helps to contribute to the overall efforts of the CASIS program. Several topics were highlighted in the management presentations that we thought might benefit from some additional discussion by the board members, in particular utilization and our interactions with our operating implementation partners. And as you know, there's an entire workshop devoted to the latter subject just following this public meeting. So we're really quite keenly interested in that subject. I'm going to ask from time to time individual board members to initiate the discussions on specific topics that we will attempt to touch on this morning. But I'm inviting every board member, as they usually do, to join in their usual raucous way so we can complete these discussions. We're going to start where we usually start, sort of the rock bed of our program, and that's science and technology. Everything we do emanates from some aspect of science. And I'm going to call upon the chairman of the Science and Technology Committee, Gordana, to perhaps get us started. What have been the highlights of the past year? Where are areas where we need to do a bit more work, and what does the future look like for this program? If I could ask you to give your comments.
Sure. Thanks a lot. So I think after this really inspiring presentations, both by CASIS staff and our three PIs, you will understand that for us, it's a real honor to serve on the board of this organization. So the CASIS mission is unique, the work on the space station is unique, and our collaborative effort is unique between the board and the CASIS, and also our partnership, joint partnership with NASA. So instead of like giving any comprehensive overview of what happened last year, I think you already heard this. What I was going to do is to maybe reflect a little bit about how CASIS is approaching fulfillment of its mission, give you two distinct examples of some of the successes this last year, and not to reiterate any of the messages already brought up by people, but rather to use these examples to reflect on how the problems are approached, where we are, and what are the challenges that we are still facing. What you could see today is that CASIS program is a very dynamic program. So while some successes have been seen, especially over the last year, there is also continued and very robust effort towards fostering new innovation and new products. What is really a characteristic of the CASIS program is that it goes way beyond science. It is science, as someone just said very eloquently, it is bringing science to life. So there is this very strong emphasis on pursuing projects that can directly and in a major way impact our lives. So this is one really distinguishing feature. The other distinguishing feature is that the CASIS program is very comprehensive. It's multidisciplinary and multidimensional. And this is how the science and technology is developing today. We all know that the most important insights are actually gleaned at the boundaries of disciplines, and things really get done when people from different disciplines and with different approaches are made to work together. You could also see that the gradient at which the CASIS is progressing is very remarkable. I mean, we do know these numbers, but I'm always impressed again when I see that almost half of the work being accomplished at this point has been done over the last year or two. And this is what gives you this huge optimism that things will continue to develop well in the future and that we are getting more and more skilled in facing the challenges that we are facing. Someone said this was never done before, and this is really like the motivating a problem of everything that CASIS is doing. So the one last thing I would like to mention about the program as a whole is another unique component is that the program is balancing, and as you could see very successfully, the innovation component, economic component, and societal component. And I think this is something that brings value way above the dollar amount, because in addition to pursuing technologies and products that are necessary and economical, we also have this responsibility for societal contribution. So not everything is economy, not everything is money. And CASIS is recognizing this and integrating the societal component very directly into what they do. So let me now just mention two examples. So I will pick one example from life sciences and one example from advanced materials to just reflect on how why space and how research in space can really help us. How can we do in space things that we cannot do on Earth? So there is really rationale for everything that CASIS is doing. So one project in life sciences that has been a signature project of CASIS for several years now is chips in space. To explain very simply what it is, over the last 5, 6, 7 years, developments in human stem cell science, tissue engineering, and microfabrication technologies came to the point that actually this effort can be integrated and we can make these microscopically sized platforms. So we are talking about micrometers, hundreds of micrometers in size, where we have very small small scale human tissues that are connected with vasculature and made to work in a way that actually emulates some of the human physiology in health and disease. So this is really important. This was not ever done before, and this is considered actually as a fast track opportunity for the field for the tissue engineering. The field is expanding. So looking into some of the numbers, you see that from 2008, when such thing hasn't existed, to today, over 10 years, the number of scientific papers increased from 0 to 15,000. I mean, the increase is exponential. So this tells you how important this field is, because it is in fact the signature area of research for the whole biomedical engineering today. The selection of tissue chips as one of the projects in CASIS is actually motivated by a number of factors. First of all, there is a very clear advantage of space. And I'll explain it in very simple words. I mean, you all know that, and some people here can confirm this, that astronauts are by definition the healthiest people on Earth. So they go in space and they start experiencing a number of difficulties. So some of those that are documented are bone loss, muscle loss, changes in immunity, susceptibility to infections, cardiovascular deconditioning, a number of factors. This happens in a very accelerated fashion, and they come back to Earth and they recover. So this is a very unique situation. So you can imagine that if you can make small human tissues that are assembled into platforms that connect them with the vasculature, you can start and bring this micro platforms in space, you can study this phenomena in an accelerated fashion with the purpose of better understanding these conditions and diseases and the purpose of testing the effects of drugs. So this is really important. One factor. The other factor is that these chips are very economical. They're very small in size. They use very small amount of resources. We heard today about up mass, down mass, astronaut time, space. All this is hugely important. You don't need too many fluids to bring up there. So it's just economical system that's completely possible to run in an automated operation. So very useful, very suitable for work at the space station. It is also a perfect project, as it has been shown, for partnering with the big players. Actually, this is the project, Mike can talk about it more, that has been funded by NIH. Now, the second cycle is in progress, so the community that works through CASIS is connected to some of the top investigators in the country that work through NIH, and this is really a joint effort which is persisting. So 5 projects will be flown that have been selected. So this is cycle number 1, and cycle number 2, I believe the due date is in about 2 weeks from now for people who are applying for this project. This is very important. And the last important thing, we all know it's about the products. It's about the common good. So partnerships with pharmaceutical industry are extremely important. So the whole scientific field is today working with pharma. Pharma is adopting these systems, and CASIS is actually very actively working on partnerships with pharmaceutical industry in promoting this very unique opportunity to actually go into biomedical research and drug development. So this is one example. The other example is something that Randy showed in one single slide. This is a very recent project that actually showed that you can make much better optical fibers in space than on Earth. We talked a lot about this project and similar projects that are similar products that are made in space. And while everyone is aware that mass production may not be reality in any near future, if ever, that there are challenges associated with making anything in space for use on Earth, this project actually is teaching us that there is a different perspective that we can take. First of all, the fact that you can make a very high quality product. So what they have made are 3 batches of optical fibers, and each batch was like a single fiber that was 100 meters long. This is a lot. This is a very nice long fiber. It was demonstrated that these fibers are extremely uniform, which is critical for their primary function, which is the transmission of light. So you have a very unique, super high quality product, unprecedented properties that you can achieve on Earth. Why is this important? First, you have the product itself. So you may have a niche application. You can use these fibers for something exceptionally important in optical networks. Second, you can use this fiber as a benchmark, as a gold standard, to just set the bar to see how high you can go with quality and measure technologies that we pursue on Earth against this. And then finally, the third component is that since this has been done in space, we can look by modeling and using experimental data, what are the determining factors, and perhaps find out some guidance, some directions on how the technologies that are Earth-based can be improved to make better optical fibers. So this is another example just to illustrate how uniquely helpful can be the work in space. And I don't want to really leave you with the impression that everything has been done. Much has been done. We are very impressed and very happy with the progress, but challenges are huge. And I would just like to make 2 comments about challenges. One is challenges are good. Challenges make us think in a very creative way, and challenges actually make us reach out to other people. Challenges are one of the main drivers of people from different disciplines working together, because this is what really helps you reach points that you can reach yourself. And I think the a partnership with NASA and with the science community and the community of commercial users is actually something that's driving this process. So I would like to actually leave you. I mean, my impression is that CASIS is making an outstanding progress, and we will continue to help the best we can in this endeavor. And we are really looking into many more good things happening in 2018 and beyond. Thank you.
I think one of the critical steps that was taken, as you emphasized, perhaps you could expand that a little bit more, is developing a very close working relationship with certain government agencies, the NIH, NCATS, the NSF. Do you see that type of relationship expanding going forward?
Yeah, I think this is really important, because NIH brings to the project resources and it brings credibility. Something that was very encouraging to me was our role, the role of the board, was actually to establish an initial connection. And this was, it was very easy and convenient, because my lab is a part of this consortium, NIH funded consortium for tissue chips. And so basically at one of the meetings, I just made some introductions, CASIS took over, and it was very impressive how quickly the whole thing progressed, because you know that National Institutes of Health doesn't have too much money. They are very conservative and careful about investing. But on a very short time scale, it happened that they did invest into this program. They were very interested in pursuing science in space for the reasons that I tried to explain today. And the program is continuing. They're also, we discussed it yesterday, they're also featuring this program, the first results of the program, Chips in Space, at one of the most prominent conferences this year that they are organizing. So I think it's a really important partnership that also brings others. NIH is also running a consortium of pharmaceutical industry interested in tissue chips. So there are multiple lines of interaction that I think would be pursued in the future.
Definitely an example of the type of real partnerships we can craft, bringing everybody who has an interest in the specific subjects to the party. Maybe I can ask Louis Duncan, who serves as the co-chairman of our Science and Technology Committee, and particularly for the technology side of it, to make some comments.
Happy to, and good morning. I want to thank you all for being here. As a co-chair on the technology side, I have a slightly different perspective on how we're moving ahead. Not in disagreement, but just, I think, maybe an expanded view. You've heard that the board has diversity of expertise and professional experience that we bring, and yet we're committed to a singular purpose, and I think work very well together, even though our board meetings are somewhat intense at times. In my case, I'm actively working also to bring into partnership the Department of Defense, which represents a very big player in space and has, in its history, created a few minor technologies like the internet, or in terms of space, the GPS system, that had a significant impact in terms of its applications to far outside of what the national security implications were originally intended to serve. We are inspired to serve on this board, and I think it's important if you want to understand us. Our job is to oversee and guide CASIS and its partnerships with NASA and the implementation partners and the growing community of users. But much like most of you all, I believe, we're inspired by this moment in history, that this is a time in which humanity is crossing the threshold, an historic threshold of moving off of our planet and moving beyond the limits of life on the surface of the Earth, motivated not solely by human curiosity and the need to explore, but as we talk about a lot in CASIS, with the other motivation of the extensive opportunities inherent in the commercial utilization of space. And to serve that utilization, there's several different advantages or opportunities that you find on the U.S. National Laboratory of ISS. We spend a lot of time talking about microgravity as a unique environment, and it truly is. But there's also the vacuum, space, plasma, and radiation environment we encounter living on the very edge of the Earth's upper atmosphere. And also as a platform, a unique opportunity for the development of resources for Earth observation and remote sensing. The pathways to technical application. Certainly the one that we spend a lot of time talking about is the traditional pathway of basic scientific research, which through discovery of new knowledge can translate into technical application. But there are other pathways for commercial utilization. I mentioned a couple of examples already, but where we're simply taking innovative ideas, concepts for the creative use of already existing capacity or capability or facilities in space with applications that go far beyond anything that were actually in the minds of the creators of those facilities, capabilities, and capacities. And finally, another pathway, which was a very good example in the computer that we talked about earlier, is simply the U.S. National Laboratory on ISS as a laboratory bench in space for the development of sensors, satellite systems that may be deployed on the space system or other free flyers or other platforms in space. And the value of this lab bench is critical to the success, development, testing, validation of those systems. Furthermore, the purpose of the board, the motivation is really to provide the facilities of the space station and the capacities and the capabilities that the user community needs, working with NASA and the implementation partners. We are driven to make the most efficient and effective use of this resource for as long as it's there. We don't play politics, but we are very driven by the user community. The board and CASIS, NASA, and the user community, the implementation partners, we need your assistance. I mean, we are sincere in these public board meetings of soliciting your comments, your thoughts, your constructive criticisms, and your ideas, because collectively we share in this important mission. We share a common goal, but a very uncommon historic mission. And you are participants in that as much as we are. And I can tell you on behalf of the entire board, we greatly appreciate your presence here today and your continued participation in this journey. So thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Any further comments from the board members on aspects of the science and technology program?
So, Phil,
Andre.
may I say a few words? I'm also a member of the Science and Technology Committee, and not surprisingly, we all bring sort of different perspectives. And I'm going to perhaps say something that's completely obvious and has already been said before. But it seems to me that it's something that needs to be stressed again and again, that the principal mission of CASIS, of translating research in space into benefits for life on Earth, is really a tremendously difficult task. And again, something that has never been done before in any context, in any country, by any program. And more than this, my colleagues' presentation were sort of hiding the fact that really the process itself is extremely complicated. And you know, general research and R&D are really risky endeavors, and time to discovery and time to market are extremely difficult to predict, even under the best circumstances. And work in space is much more challenging. So moving from planning to flying experiments is resource intensive, is time consuming, and real progress is really likely to require multiple flights with really all the operational complexities and risks that entails. And with a 6-year horizon until 2024, I think time is really not on our side. So I will stop here for.
Any further comments? Yes, please, Jan.
So I'm sort of the practical guy. As an investor, I always have to sort of look at what's my rate of return and how can I stay unique as a participant in a program like that. This is a very exciting program, what we saw this morning. It's growing by leaps and bounds. And sort of, I think what we should do is, if you take a step back and you say, we want to attract corporations to get to space and do their experiments and get commercialization going and really start trying to bring LEO into the application manual that R&D facilities have and large corporations have. And one of the key items that I always come up with, and I think the management team should sort of comment on that, is trade secrets, intellectual property, that really go along with that. Because if we can't secure that and safeguard that, we're not going to get any traction beyond that. And I think as we have probably 80 investors on the phone lines listening to this presentation, because it's really sort of becoming on the forefront what the opportunities are. But that's a key question that everybody's going to ask us. So maybe what we can do is just dive into that for a little bit so we get some comfort going here.
I can answer that question. We work with NASA. We have a cooperative agreement, which is a living, breathing document. We've had several big iterations, and IP and data rights has been something that we've been working with them closely. In the past, it's required commercial companies to go through a waiver application process, which is somewhat time intensive and delays the process. And we've worked in the last iteration to we have flow down clauses that come from those cooperative agreements that flow into our contracting vehicles. So now if their commercial companies are getting a user agreement, which doesn't require any funding, then there's restrictions lifted on the IP and data rights, which is definitely helpful. And Cindy can attest that it's been beneficial in kind of the sales process. So we continue to work with them. We work directly with counsel in NASA headquarters. And it's been an ongoing process, but we've been able to get that done.
I think this is a subject we can get into in considerable depth this afternoon during the workshop with the implementation partners, but I think we do recognize it's a very sensitive area. There's intellectual property on every side of the equation. The project sponsors will bring in many instances proprietary information, and that would like to see that secured, of course. And the implementation partners, undoubtedly with the technologies they're providing, have their own interests that they wish to protect, that they consider both proprietary and highly competitive. So it is a bigger subject than perhaps we can address in this setting of this board meeting, but I think it's an area of very important concerns that we can explore perhaps in much greater detail this afternoon. Let me move on to another topic, unless, yes.
I would like to just add one comment. We have talked about the issues of the advantages of doing research on the platform itself, clearly. You've also talked about the importance of our commercial partners, our integrating partners, all of that. But as we approach some of the large corporations, and I was the chairman of one of the largest of the world's commercial satellites who were imaging Earth. Now, we used to say that that was scientific or for mapping, but it had many, many applications, and some of the smaller countries in the world would buy the information because that was a second-class kind of super information satellite for them, and it was important. Now, as we looked at our market, that was a huge investment to make one of these satellites that could last 10 years, that we would insure, and that we knew the market in hyperspectral was coming. We knew the market that was well defined in 2 or 3 areas of the spectrum, and certainly in color. That was absolutely important. And you all know some of the products of these large companies. When you look at Google Earth, for example, they are one of our very large efforts there entirely. But the boards would then look and say, we have to invest in a large satellite, and it's got to be reliable, it's got to be proven, the market has got to be proven. And there were no really good halfway steps that were available. Until now, you heard from our briefing some of the important new capabilities that are being pioneered by our partners, our commercial partners, by Teledyne and in their Muses platform, that sort of thing. And that is a much smaller challenge, investment challenge, than building a whole new massive system for that step. So we have to be able to find ways to teach the opportunities to these companies that are thinking at a completely different level. And obviously that is part of our sales team. It's part of our ambitious and creative integrating partners that are out there, and they're all doing those things as well. But it is a different kind of decision for a board of directors, just as it's a different kind of decision for the scientific areas that we've been talking about.
I think that's an excellent segue into the next subject, which is one of utilization. It's been touched on pretty heavily by Cindy's presentation as well as Ken's. It's an ongoing challenge. I guess there was an assumption 6 years ago that if we created it and announced its availability, they would come in very large numbers. And I think what we're finding through our experience that it takes a bit of work. We're open for business, but with that, we have to bring basically an information educational program to alert investigators in every sector, be it in the world of commerce, the academic research institutes, and government agencies as to the opportunities that reside in LEO and the advantages of working with us. So utilization is something that we have to constantly pay attention to and address every time we meet. There are several elements of utilization that the program is addressing, but we can explore further, I think, in the setting of this board meeting. One is demand, increasing demand, particularly amongst so-called non-traditional users. And the program has done a lot of very good work, requesting proposals in specific research pathways that we envision as being important opportunities that would open up the world of LEO to a new set of investigators to increase their enthusiasm, participation, be it stem cells, flow dynamics, protein crystal growth. We have appearances at conferences all throughout the United States in relevant scientific disciplines, but most especially the increasingly well-attended ISS R&D conference, which we hold every July. I think that's getting a lot of traction. But most importantly, we have Cindy's troops from business development marching through the doors of every research institute and corporation in the United States and trying to inform them to the opportunities that exist. in Leo and asking them to prepare proposals that CASIS can review. But there's a great deal more work to be done in terms of improving the demand curve. We've got a lot more effort to expend there. The other element are the processes, the procedures, perhaps the bureaucracy, as it might be viewed, of getting a project from concept to actually being flown. What are the review steps, the approvals, the other procedures that are required to getting on? In essence, the time from concept evolution to actually execution on the station. And in some industries, that is critically important, particularly in the biotech industry or certainly in Silicon Valley, that we can't have very long processes in order for these companies to participate with any enthusiasm. So let's discuss the overall issues of utilization. We've heard from the management team as to the new procedures and systems they're putting in place, the attention to this issue as an ongoing challenge. And maybe I can start with Joe, if you would perhaps give us some insights as to what you think the organization is doing now to respond to some of these issues.
Yeah, when I got asked to be on this board, I'm not a scientist, I'm a lowly MIT guy. I ran operations worldwide for IBM, Toshiba, Gateway, other companies.
I might note that some of those companies don't exist at the moment, Joe, but we do not, we do not hold you accountable.
But I'm the guy who sold Gateway to the Chinese guys, and you know, it was a little profit in that. But as I sat through my first meetings, I realized that the problems on keeping this machine running, after all the science is talked about and all the experiments are developed, keeping this machine running is with Ken and Cindy and Warren, and they keep the wheels on this thing. And I sat here, you know, all the problems that they're dealing with, and I was always amazed that Ken was doing as well as he was doing with spreadsheets. I don't know how you were keeping up with all this, but I grew up in a world, and you can hear it here, I heard it here, where my salespeople could sell anything I couldn't make. You got that? My manufacturing operations people could make anything if you only gave me the time. Our lead times in business, what I'm trying to get to, the problems they're having as business entities have these exact same problems. And my job in the last year and a half was trying to get some of these processes to improve what they're working on, not do what they're working on, but to improve it. I mean, we have lead times of 6 months to a year that I have to order this stuff. In IBM, I had $20, $30 billion in inventory coming at me through any period, like a tsunami wave. We couldn't change our minds. The salesmen and women, the marketing people could not tell me exactly what boxes, when they needed them, but we had to plan. And we did it with what he's calling RUP, R-U-P. We did it with MRP. So I sat down with the team, and let's add to all the work they were doing and put a repeatable, definable process in place. And I looked at the topics you guys just talked about, demand, implementation partners, value, utilization, and resource management as one subject. One can't work without the other. The plan, the process that Ken and Warren and Cindy have now put in place, doing this monthly MRP, RUP process, says you've got to sit down, you've got to project the best you can, Cindy and Warren, in common boxes that he can understand, and you saw them up on that chart. And we're going to look at this every single month and see where we are and what customers Cindy and Warren have to go get. And it's going to change over time. But we have to put a stake in the ground because some of these things are taking 6 months, not some, all 6 months to a year. In the computer business, you know, you got 70 different models that none of you can figure out when you go into the stores, right? But 70 different models with 5,000 components made in 60 companies in 80 countries, 6 continents, and the prices are 1 cent to $6,000. The yields are all over the floor, and you never know what's coming at you. And I got measured on profit, margin, and inventory. Now, I could fix some of the problems that these guys have with inventory, costly, but let's make inventory of low-level projects. That when Cindy can't deliver the products to Warren that he needs on that chart. Remember, he had that chart? I need 2 of these, 6 of these, and 8. That is a major, major milestone for this group of people. That he can tell her in the numbers she understands, I need 4 of those by this date. she commits to it, or, and at the next MRP meeting, she decommits from it, and we make changes. We do this every day in industry. You did it in HP, I did it in IBM, and in Gateway. I actually did this, believe it or not, in Radio Shack, if you want to shoot yourself, right? I was a consultant putting this in. I've done it we've done this, and Ken and Cindy understand it. Hospitals. How does a hospital look at the utilization of a major assets that they have? MRI machines, operating rooms. They can't predict surgeries and brain problems. If they could figure out this a little bit better, they could share with other hospitals. And some of the hospitals that I've worked with are actually doing exactly what Ken is doing. Not perfect. They're trying to get their utilization from 30% to 60%. So the work that they've done, I am very, very, I don't want to be a cheerleader, but I am very pleased. The science community on our board now understand this. They know what they can go to Cindy on, and they know what Warren can make, and we can now commit. Now, but I'll end it this way. For the why this is all one subject to me. For the implementation partners, if you can imagine a world where they're going in the next couple of months, where when we run an MRP and he tells Cindy, I need 4 of these, 10 of these, 8 of these, we share that information real time with the implementation partners. Real time. You can be part of our MRP process, our RUP process. Come on in, you can see what we're doing. You can vote on the stuff, not vote on it, but you can elect which ones you want to bid on. And we're putting the processes as an honest broker in place today, as we speak, to manage that for the implementation partners. So it's really come a long way. I haven't done it. I mean, I talk to these guys at 4 o'clock in the morning, wherever they are, but it is really starting to work, and I'm really proud of the group. And the scientists in the board now understand this. They are on this. They support the team, and it's working well.
Thank you, Joe. Carolyn, do you have any comments, an extension of what Joe has?
I do, and Joe, I share his enthusiasm for the opportunity that we've got to bring some of our business skills in the areas of process, and our humility when we hear Gordana Lewis and others talk about the science. One of the reasons that I joined the board, I guess the real reason, is I believe in basic science research, like you all do. And frankly, it has been pushed out of large corporate America. We don't have basic research in companies anymore. We have a lot of development and a little bit of research, but not really good basic research. Good basic research is still funded by the government, comes out of our national labs, and in many of our great universities. Yes, we have venture capital, but that's limited, and he's looking for a return. And basic research, as you know, as I am told anyway, it takes about 20 years for you to know that you've really changed the world in many cases. And maybe only 5% pays off, and that doesn't work well either in the commercial world. So what I realized was that it's really important to support the organizations that do basic research, and the opportunity that CASIS and NASA are bringing to commercial companies who can't afford to do it themselves, to use a platform which, granted, is expensive, but it's funded by the government, because basic research is needed. And you give an extraordinary opportunity to the commercial companies. And I am extremely proud to be able to have this opportunity presented to commercial and universities in partnership with all of you.
Andre, let me ask you to address the issues that the challenges we face in dealing with the academic community and getting them interested to participate in fulfilling our demand requirements. Certainly, if we provide them large, unstructured grants, I think we would see a very enthusiastic response. But short of that, what can be done? What are the challenges we face?
Thank you, Phil. And as somebody who's sort of spent, more than a decade herding cats, I think I am probably the one to be put on the spot for this. But let me emphasize, though, that given the rather limited resources CASIS has, and all the challenges that have been, mentioned, I think the organization has done really a tremendous job in promoting the national lab and on the ISS and increasing the quality and impact of the research. And you've heard Craig already speak to this, and I must say that I'm personally really impressed by the fact that we've supported over 100 projects this past year, and that we managed really to get industry and other agencies to invest more than $3 for every dollar invested by CASIS. I think this is really a tremendous, really tremendous advance really of this organization over the past few years. And clearly, the one thing I should say though, that first of all, the academic community is really intimidated, I would say, by the challenges we're talking about and by the time it really takes from concept to publish paper. In the end, publish or perish is still really the overarching driver for academic success. And I should say that much of the progress that we've seen in recent years in CASIS happened through funding of a series of really important independent research projects involving individuals or small numbers of researchers at universities and industry, and securing really this steady pipeline of such projects is obviously critical for the full utilization of the ISS resources. Having said that, though, to answer your question, I really think that in order to attract more of the academic community, the National Lab, we must change our mindset around managing R&D on the ISS National Lab. I mean, let me just remind you that in the history of science, the few cases in which humans were able to deliver with a planned time frame, and this is really the challenge we face with the National Lab, really required large resources and an urgency that really brought together a large critical mass of the very best and brightest minds, like the development of the atomic bomb, sequencing of the Human Genome Project, the Human Genome Project, or putting them on the moon. So, academia is really an extremely competitive place, but perhaps really unique to the academic environment is really the paradoxical notion that it is really in the end competition that drives collaboration, particularly among the leaders really in their field. And really what's driven a great deal of progress in science and technology is the idea that you are either on the bus or off the bus. And when the bus is moving forward with the very best people in your field, you better be on the bus. So I think really for the ISS National Lab, we need to foster the sense of urgency that builds a community around larger thematic areas such as, Gordana mentioned, bone and muscle, aging, the development of technological materials with characteristics that are not directly accessible on Earth. This is not instead, but in addition to the pipeline of projects we have been developing to fully utilize the National Lab resources. And of course, to make this possible, we need much larger resources. So my belief is that this larger way of convening and organizing science, commensurate really with the status of a national lab, is more likely to secure the greater funding required to support meaningful advances. And venture capitalists and industry partners and federal agencies are more likely to come together and minimize risk of an investment by supporting these large consortia focused on bringing together large critical mass groups of thought leaders with a common interest in important problems. I think we've sort of done, we haven't done a great job yet in building consortia, but I must say it's a very difficult thing to do, but I'm very pleased to see that in collaboration with the NIH, NSF, and NASA, I think we are evolving really the CASIS model towards these stronger collaborations.
It's beginning to happen. Steve, as a former astronaut, what do you think we're missing in our attempts to promote the use of the ISS?
That's a tough one. Well, let me first of all say that in terms of my background, it's very in line with what Joe and Carolyn have come from in terms of process development, strategic thinking, and aspects like that. And in my NASA experience, I was always amazed that we were able to have a system where we could utilize the resources effectively, because I think what people miss is sometimes when we buy up mass from a partner, we often term it as kilograms, and that's really just a really small constraint that we have to deal with. There's, of course, the size of the payload. Does it need power? Does it need cooling? And how much crew time it takes? So I think this RUP system is really a magical system that will really help us move forward, and I'm just so impressed that we've come up with that, and it'll help us move forward. The other thing I'll mention, I think that is unique is, you know, when you're in space and you're in this place where everything's floating, you really understand the magic of it. And I think that that's a point that is difficult to explain if you haven't been there, but for the people that we're trying to reach out to and the people online and the people in the room, there is no other place like it. And we shouldn't lose the perspective that it's really a magical laboratory. There's a feature of it that we can take advantage of that exists no other place in the world and never has. And so when I talk to the public about what it's like to fly in space, it's the most common question to an astronaut. I tell them it's a really magical place. And I continue to go on and talk about the business opportunities, because I was actually a business person before I flew in space. I'm the only astronaut ever selected that has an MBA background. And I wrote articles 25 years ago about the business opportunities in space. At the time, Robert Walker was a congressman who was very active in the first efforts to commercialize space. And so I would just encourage you, as you try and gain advocacy in your group and in your own mind about whether this is the right place to go, it's an incredibly magical place that can give you advantages that other people who don't have the foresight you have will miss out on. And so for me, that's the biggest challenge. You know, there's a lot of corporations in America that apparently Cindy's talking to every single one of them too. So it's that getting over that hurdle that, you know, really is a business advantage for people to take care of, to take advantage of. And so to me, it's this magical place where you can get an advantage over other people.
Thank you, Steve. Any further comments on the issues related to utilization? If not, let me move on to another topic, which I mentioned previously, and that is relationships that CASIS establishes with its integration partners. There are about 30 of them now, 12 of them based actually on the space station, and they are essential players and partners in everything we do. So the relationship between CASIS and this group has to be seamless and very transparent. Some concerns have been raised that perhaps at time from time we might have shown some favoritism to one player or another. I think our operating procedures, concepts has to be one of a level playing field, fairness, transparency. Everybody gets an equal opportunity to compete for a project once it's been offered up. But we have to be sure that all our policies and procedures are working to that end. And it's always a good thing from time to time to have a step back and to take a look at the procedures we're using and see if they're working optimally. The situation is going to be increasingly competitive going forward. The space station, the National Laboratory, is a finite resource. And when you have as many as 30 implementation partners all competing for the business, then there's always the possibility that some conflict to rise. Our job is to make sure that the project sponsors are fully informed as to the opportunities that exist on the station to fulfill the requirements of the research projects, be it services or facilities, and for them to make independently an informed choice as to which of the implementation partners they will use. But let's discuss our policies and how we're ensuring that this type of process is working. Now, Abe and I have been out trooping around a little bit the last couple of weeks, getting better informed as to who our implementation partners are, what are the services they provide, and we've been very impressed in that regard, and some of the issues that might have arisen as they've worked with CASIS. And maybe I can ask General Abe to give us some of his experience and lessons he might have learned from those discussions.
The first part of the experience is really a confidence builder. It is fun, it is rewarding to see just the level of innovation, business skills, technical skills that are coming together in every one of these. They may be a very, very small company. They may be a larger company that's growing fast. All of those are really exciting. There were some themes, obviously, because we were trying to ensure the fairness issue. And the themes were, one, transparency. But transparency has to be in accordance with some of the very critical proprietary or other elements, even though we are dealing with a huge and wonderful public asset. So that must be very primus in our eyes, and we must find ways to do that. Now, CASIS was created really as the Congress recognized that there were limits in government contracting and other approaches that would inhibit NASA. NASA's a terrific commercial outfit. They've done wonderful things over the years, and they continue to do that. But they do have certain limits, and therefore CASIS was created to be an independent, non-government partner that would work with all levels of the community that need to experiment in space. So therefore, fairness, even though that is not a requirement in terms of we're not operating in accordance with all the fairness policies in the federal acquisition regulation, all of those. But fairness has to be the principle. And the best way to achieve that is as much transparency as possible. And we got that from small companies and large. In some cases, the smaller companies said, we can't afford a large marketing operation, and we want to leverage off of yours. And therefore, please give us information about the opportunities as soon as you can in the cycle. And that's a vital input, and perhaps one of the most important ones, Bill.
Others want to provide their opinions? How we do this job better? Again, we've recognized it be of such importance that we're actually devoting a complete workshop to the issue following this public meeting. So I think there'll be ample opportunity to explore further. The only thing I can assure the implementation partners that are here is that we fully understand the issues involved, and we're going to do the best job possible, both in the management team as well as the board, in providing oversight to ensure this is done as well as it can be. We measure our success in some significant measure by your success. We're in this together, and hopefully we can work in a very cooperative way going forward. Howard, you haven't had a chance to say anything yet. Maybe you'd like to comment.
Well, I think there's a couple things. One is I think what Steve mentioned is probably one of the critical things when you mention that this is a magical place up there and the opportunities of what one can do. I think in the world of science and medicine, there is a great opportunity to try to figure out some of the innovative technologies that are out there. Gordana mentioned organs on a chip. I think that as a physician, this is where the promise lies. A lot of the promise lies in the future of medicine. I am curious when we hear Yana speak about some of the issues of education and technology, because I think that if we don't inspire the next generation on this whole area, or in some ways that's one of the most important things we can do, is inspire the next generation. When we had our R&D meeting last year in 2017 in Washington, D.C., I had an opportunity to speak with a lot of the students, and also had a chance to go out to one of the high schools in New York City to talk to some of the students afterwards, because one of the students there actually won one of the awards at that time. And it was very inspiring to see how interested students are as we move forward. I think that just all of us around the table here, particularly the generation that's a little bit older, remembers the moon missions and realizes how inspired we were. And I think it's important for us to make sure that the next generation is also as inspired as we were at that time, because that's where the future really lies for us.
Thank you, Howard. It's a terrific segue into the question I'm going to ask Yanis, who chairs our STEM education programs. I think this is certainly acknowledged as one of the major success stories of the CASIS program, largely through your efforts and Ken's. And perhaps you can give us a description of where we are today and where you expect this program to go in the future years.
Thank you, Phil. As I mentioned during the introduction, I'm the president and director of the Museum of Science in Boston. It's one of the largest science centers in the world. And I'm in the business of inspiring and educating primarily young people. And the reason I joined the board is the space station is probably the most amazing platform in the world to inspire young people in science and engineering. It is really cool, and it's science and engineering, which is a unique combination. The team at CASIS over the years has done an amazing job into transforming just a bunch of education projects to now a comprehensive program. And what's even more amazing is how little money they use into doing so. The budget for education is a small fraction, about 8%, 8 or 9% of the budget of CASIS. So about 4 years ago, there was just, as I said, a bunch of projects that were not really well coordinated. And the way that CASIS operates is they partially fund a project. The funding goes to a delivery partner, like Boys and Girls Club or Girls Inc. But it was sort of uncoordinated. A couple of years ago, we tried to glue all this together, and we formed the Space Station Explorers program. And also we pulled together all the partners into a consortium that meets annually during a summit. So things are much better coordinated now and better funded. And we went from 8 projects to 23 projects. We went from 40,000 kids, reaching 40,000 young people a year, to now 800,000 people a year. And the budget has been flat over all these years. We still have some challenges. Funding is always, I'm always looking for money for my job. So it is always people that are in the education business always are looking for funding. We are doing well, but we could do better. The second challenging area is evaluating our performance in this area. If you're in formal education, like in school, regular school, you can track your students and see how they did after graduation. If you're in the informal area, like a museum or a television program or CASIS, it's very difficult to know what difference you really made in the lives of young people. So this is a universal challenge. I used to be at the NASA Advisory Committee and the Education Subcommittee, and we had the same problem at NASA too, measuring the effectiveness of education programs. So that is a challenge that we're trying to address, and during this summit, which is in a few weeks, we'll work with our partners to brainstorm to see how we can better evaluate the effectiveness of the program. And the third challenge is to try to figure out ways, without disrupting the research, of course, which is the most important thing happening in the station, how we could increase their involvement on on-orbit experiments. The goal is to reach 2 million students a year by 2020, and we're going to do it. We're in a good path. So I want to congratulate Ken and his team for a great job they have done.
Thank you very much, Yanis. I think at this point, first of all, I'd like to thank the board for all their thoughtful comments. I think we should move to a section where we open the floor those in the room and those that are on the website. Please bring your questions to the board and we'll try to address them.
Okay, well, thank you. This was very interesting to hear the board talking about the various challenges. I have a couple of suggested recommendations as a user, as a scientist. I was very pleased to work with CASIS, with Chad Berkeley was the person in Houston that was taking care of the business development. And since his departure, I felt a void somehow in the Houston area. I just want to remind everybody that the Houston hosts the largest medical center in the world, where a lot of research is actually developed and a lot of different kind of companies are actually formed. There are type of activities such as the TMCX, as well as the Johnson & Johnson incubator. They are really developed to specifically incubate small companies and take them, to prime time. So my recommendation would be possibly to bring somebody in-house in Houston, in the medical center, to leverage all the different opportunities that there are for expanding utilization of International Space Station. Matter of fact, every time that I present my work and our research and the support from CASIS, there are a number of different investigators locally. They are very, very interested. And somehow they found some challenges accessing this type of opportunities. The second kind of recommendation would be, in my opinion, to open it up and kind of promote the unsolicited proposal mechanism, because matter of fact, you have a number of ideas that may not match specifically with the RFP, the calls for proposals, and therefore you would have opportunities to help in an untapped area.
Thank you very much. We'll certainly study Houston as an area in which we have to perhaps devote a few more resources. We did last year identify the Silicon Valley area as a place where we need to do more business, and based an individual there for the purposes of our business development activities. But we can study Houston as well. Cindy, do you want to comment on that?
Sure, and I would just say that we are, I think as Greg announced earlier, we are hiring more commercial innovation business development folks, and Houston is definitely one of our target areas. So we understand that we do have a hole there, and we want to, obviously fill that. And we've talked to the medical center community that you've talked about. They've actually offered us some free space where we could actually have one of our business development folks there. So it's definitely appealing to us, just as we've talked to the Houston Technology Collaborative and lots of the associations in Houston. We definitely recognize it as a very important innovation ecosystem. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Cindy. Other questions from the floor or from the webinar?
This is a question from the Cytofine Observer. Actually, you mentioned when you talk about inspiration, I'm one of the inspired children, except for the fact that I was in my 30s and writing a dissertation in sociology. So you can also inspire sociologists.
Never too late.
I'm writing a book about the space station. So again, this is from the perspective of an observer. And first, thank you for having this meeting and for having a public meeting. This is a really interesting space to meet you all. What I see from my perspective is that this is a very outcome-oriented language that, of course, Prevail and has sedimented as a way to make assessments of value about this program. You talk about value, you talk about impact, and process and complexity seem to be either words that are mentioned or processes and factors, things that happen behind, sort of in the backstage of what is presented to the public in terms of their understanding of the space station program. And I think this is crucial considering the fact that this is a program that needs time. And really to be able to convey and communicate the complexity of that process, I think, is key and it's fundamental. And it's, in fact, whatever, of course, on a very different scale and with different things. It's what I'm doing in my own research. I'm trying to really do justice to the complexity of this program. So I'm very curious as you're developing these new tools of assessments and these new metrics, what's the role of process and what's also the role in that context of something that's very, very valuable here, which is the learning experience of researchers, as they have to not only adapt their science to the space station, but also as the space station has adapted its infrastructure to their questions. So I'm curious about how you're thinking about that in the board of directors.
Anybody like to respond? Andre, would you?
Well, I mean, I can speak again to, your point of view is clearly somehow in the minds of the academic community, and there is certainly a disconnect in the time frame, and somehow aligning incentives is a very complex issue. And I would say, again, my point of view, which I've sort of mentioned already, and my colleagues on the board know, and we've discussed very often, is this question of what kind of process do you need to bring in place to educate the community, and somehow to launch collaborations that somehow manage this sort of time issue that you're mentioning. So, my sense is that we're actually working actively. I mean, again, this is a very dynamic organization. We have a time frame which is somehow artificially imposed on us, and yet, science and the impact of what CASIS does is and the collaboration with NASA and other agencies. This is something that's going to be here for a long time to come. So I think these processes are evolving, as Joe mentioned. I think we are looking at every single aspect of the organization and trying to build, different pathways and processes supporting these different pathways, as different as these pathways might actually be in responding to the kind of time issues you're talking about.
Yeah. I think the best catalyst for success is success. And we've had 3 presentations today by project sponsors who have realized the benefit of working in the national laboratory, and hopefully those messages will be received rather broadly. The analogy I like to use, because it goes back to my field of endeavor for many years, is cancer research. I entered the field in the mid to late 1960s, and no one was interested, just as perhaps no one was interested in working in Leo. The only organization that really devoted any resources to developing cancer therapies was the government, the National Cancer Institute. In this case, it's NASA, represents the origins. And it took quite a period of time before the pharmaceutical industry woke up to the point where, hey, there may be gold in them hills. They began licensing a few products from the government. And they saw that the market, which they originally viewed as very fragmented, we can certainly look at space research in this way. There are so many different disciplines that are currently represented, and small. And of course, we're talking about whether or not any of our projects can go to scale. Which one, and how do we do that? But over the course of the years, the research community, private, public, academic, woke up, and now the cancer research business is many trillions, and there isn't probably a single pharmaceutical or biotech company in the United States that doesn't think they are a cancer company. But that transformation took several decades, and the initial demonstration that there was real opportunity, and I think CASIS is laying the groundwork for that. It may take a lot longer than anybody would like to calculate, but we're certainly, the trajectory looks very positive, and we just need the staying power to realize the potential that we now recognize.
And Phil, if I may interject something on process questions,
please,
if you don't mind?
Yes.
What was your name? Nice to meet you. One of the things that I think we work very hard at CASIS through our processes, Warren, his team, and Cindy and their team, really the entire organization, we try to have a very outward-facing process that is very easy to understand, because a huge segment of what we're chasing are new users, people who've never done this before, so they don't understand the process. And I think we've tried to design our processes, and we're always enhancing them, is with velocity. We want to be able to move very quickly, very rapidly. Having said that, not everyone wants to. So I believe we have a process and a framework that accommodates the pace that the user wants to move at. We've got examples where we've received proposals, run them through the selection process, and gotten them in orbit in less than 6 months, actually 4 months. We've also had examples where it's taken years. So velocity is very important for us. We're on a short time frame. We need to move fast. Having said that, it's also a malleable process that can accommodate user pace as well.
There's certainly a heightened sense of urgency within the organization as a whole. We've got to get a lot of work done and potentially in a relatively short period of time.
Afterburner, right, General Abe? Afterburner.
General Abe, keep reminding
Full
me.
afterburner.
No warp speed.
Warp speed, excuse me. I think we have a question from the webinar.
Yes. First question comes from Marius De Silva. There are two sides to commercialization. One is commercializing capabilities at the ISS and translated product commercialization on Earth. Is there a priority in which one is more important to private investors? I think Warren, you might take that.
Warren.
Sure. So I'll answer this based on my experience working in a private equity fund prior to being at CASIS, and then I'll let Jan, who has immensely more experience than me on that side of the house, to answer it. But when an investor's looking at an opportunity, I don't think those factors matter. What matters to them is the team, the market opportunity, revenue potential of the business, what problem they're solving, and how eloquent of a solution or effective of a solution the product, service, or technology may be.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and it really comes down to what we call the team. There's not an investor, a private investor or a corporate investor that wants to invest into a team that is limping along. So it's about NASA, it's about CASIS, it's our implementation partners, it's about our financial backers that all work in tandem to achieve a great goal. And what you normally see, and this is, I'd like to take a step back sometimes and look at CASIS a couple of years ago when it was formed to commercialize science in space. And you just think about that, how difficult an assignment that is. You look at the most recent report, the F-17 report, and you go to the last couple of pages, and you look at the amount of activities that is going to be taking place that's in the pipeline, you can see that momentum is building. And the only reason that the momentum is building is that the team is coming together and starting to execute fairly well, which gives confidence to private investors and corporate investors to participate in that. And I think that's the momentum that we're building, and I think that's the momentum that we need to take forward. We have our growing pains, but we readjust. And transparency and communication are sort of the pillars how CASIS is operating and going to be operating in the future. So I think that's sort of the motto that this CASIS has adopted, and I think it bodes well for the future.
Jan, while you have the microphone, let me ask you a question that has its parallels in our interactions with implementation partners. Warren and his group has built up a very large investor network that has become increasingly interested in space research and the opportunities that might arise from it. What should be the operating principles for CASIS in interfacing that investor network with companies, particularly the small emerging sector, that needs capital?
Yeah, so I'm very impressed with what Warren has done. He built really a very good stock of what I call investors that are willing to and looking at space as a future. It's my future competitors, by the way, as a venture capitalist that is looking at space to make a real mark here. But in essence, what we want to do is combine two communities. We like to combine a community of researchers and science people with those investors, because ultimately, in all those, what we do as investors, we look at researchers that actually have a value proposition that resonates with us for societal reasons, for financial reasons, commercial reasons, and we want to bring those together. And one of the things that we talked about in the board is to really make those connections a lot easier, a lot more transparent, where people can the scientists can bring their ideas forward, and we try to match through a portal the investment community with that. And I think that will seed the future of CASIS and of course, science, commercialization of science at the space station.
Further questions? Yes.
This again comes online from Kristen Van Vliet. She was referring earlier to some of the customer examples. She said, these are all impressive examples. They appear to be possible in part because the cost of launch are subsidized heavily by NASA/the federal government. How is CASIS establishing the customer willingness to pay for the anticipated end of federal support of the ISS in 2025?
Lauren, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah. So that is a good question, and I think what we talk about, and I think what was recognized in that question is that the cost of transportation and all of that infrastructure is still 100% subsidized. And the way that we talk about that with two customers is that's a huge benefit, and it's time to take that opportunity now. When you look at the other non-transportation costs, that's the internal cost it takes, your own research labs, your own resources to conduct that cost, along with the implementation partner cost. Greg and actually Phil noted that that's about $159 million of total cost. Of that, $107 million is non-NASA, non-CASIS. So there's a tremendous move that we've seen from organizations that are willing to not just pay their own internal costs, but also pay a portion of the implementation partner cost directly. And we attribute that growth to a recognition of the value that they're seeing of doing research on station. And we're continuing to see that trajectory where we have targets right now where 80% of that internal cost should be paid by the organization itself. And we now have a target of 40% of implementation partner costs being paid directly by our customers. And we see that move, even increasing as we see additional recognition of value. So we're really pleased about that, and that's a measurement that we continue to look at.
Thank you, Cindy. One more from the back.
Another question online comes from Alan DeLuna. Early in the brief statements were made about a very large, I believe the number may have been 115 million commercial investment already made in ISS R&D. Is this actual documented direct investment, or is it an estimation of the value of the investment? Example, estimated in kind support. Warren?
Yep. Phil, I can take this. So the numbers are documented. The way that we calculated that number was the investigators provided us both their direct funding as well as their in-kind funding. And so that was aggregated to calculate that number. We have it documented on a per project basis.
Thank you. Another question comes online from Miraj Kiri. Does CASIS accept international experiments from private companies around the world, particularly those in countries that don't have the best political relationship with the U.S.?
Good. Greg, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah. Okay, so we serve the U.S. taxpayer on the U.S. ISS National Laboratory. So we require partnership with domestic partners, and so international players can partner with domestic companies, and governments in other countries work through NASA's international relations group to work projects. As far as the politics, we're not about politics. We're about the mission, and so these partnerships can be complex, and where politics enters into the equation, then we turn it over to our NASA friends to work some of those political challenges.
Another one from the back.
Yes. Next question comes from Jeff Faust. Given reports that the administration will seek to end funding of the ISS in the mid-2020s, what planning is CASIS doing for potential end-of-life station, and how will that affect efforts to attract and support researchers?
Abe, do you want to take that?
Yeah. First of all, what Greg indicated is the best way we can plan for anything in the future is to really work effectively to create this market and to be successful. And we are not about politics. We're not about that decision process. But our mission will contribute to the growth that's coming. If you want specific answers in that, there are two places I think you should look. First is NASA. But the second place is in the eyes, the hearts, the imagination, and the drive that our researchers are showing in science, that our commercial partners, our integrating partners are showing to make their businesses successful. And just look at how fast the space economy is growing and the potential is there. If you'll allow me just to step back a little bit philosophically, there was a wonderful television series that those of you who are older here will remember. The younger people won't. It was by Kenneth Clark, then later Sir Kenneth Clark, and it was called Civilization. It's a wonderful, wonderful series of television, and it was committed to a book, same author, by Kenneth Clark. And in the first chapter, he talks about what he's trying to do. And he says that only a few times in history, I'm paraphrasing now, only a few times in history has it been so apparent that there were these bursts of human will, innovation, determination, and administration and technology. You put all those things together. And he said, those times are evident now, today, still. We are in one of those times, and when I urge you to talk to the people who are creating the issue, those are the footprints for tomorrow's economy in space, and there's no stopping it. It is, if you compare to the railroads when they came together as a whole new operation, we're so far past the golden spike that you can't believe that. All of us believe it. I think most of the people in this room and who are on the effort believe it as well. So the answers for these things are in our teams and our creative people that are pursuing that goal.
Thank you. We have one more question from the back.
Yeah, the last question comes from Lauren Casserly. She's a middle school teacher who'd like to know what an ideal future of CASIS in education would look like. How will you increase ease of access to students and market interest to younger audience? How do you think current school curriculums will have to change in order to create more students that have the skills valuable to your industry and are more aware of NASA and CASIS' advancements?
Giannis and Kent.
Our approach is to form partnerships with organizations that reach a lot of kids, like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Girls Inc., and to work with them to develop engaging experiences to inspire the kids and educate them as well. The formal education, the school is a little bit trickier because there are certain standards, learning standards that each state has that focus in science and increasingly in engineering. And so far we have been focusing in the informal world. However, we are interested in focusing in the formal, in the school environment. As our program evolves, we can try to align some of the informal learning experiences with the national and state standards so that we can provide to teachers an easy way for them to navigate through the developed materials and incorporate them into their classrooms. In this world now, unless something is in the standard, the teachers don't teach it because they have to make sure that the curriculum they need to cover, and is tested. However, a lot of our curriculum matches the standards, both in the life sciences and in the physical sciences and in engineering. And the space station, as I said in the beginning, is an amazing platform to teach kids about pretty much all the sciences and engineering. So as we develop things in the informal world, on our website through the Space Station Explorers program, we're going to increasingly be sliding toward the formal education. Our website is spacestationexplorers.org, where you can find more information about what we have, and we always welcome ideas of how we can do a better job in reaching more kids, both in schools and in out-of-school programs.
And yes, thank you, Jonas. If I could add to that, and if you're still on the phone, this is Ken Shields. To address the formal education market, we do have a network of educator champions, if you will. We call them Space Station Explorer Ambassadors. These are teachers in service who sign on with us and who are taking our curriculum, our tools of engagement into their classrooms and finding ways to make it relevant to what their required curriculum is. So for us, it's very hard, as Dr. Mialis mentioned, it's very hard to penetrate that formal school district system, if you will. But if we can find champions and start that grassroots approach, I think that's the most effective way for us to really make a difference there. And signs, you know, we have indications that this is really taken off. We've got over 300 ambassadors now in 42 different states. Once again, these are teachers in service in schools that are leveraging this programming within their classrooms. Of course, with that, we have to continue to focus and concentrate on growing our funding pool, our resource pool, to be able to further enable these teachers who really want to use this curriculum, but need some help in acquiring the resources that need to be there. We're going to do that through third-party funding, hopefully through private or philanthropy sponsorships and donations to the cause. So that's the goal.
Ken, please don't omit on our efforts through established groups such as the Girls of America.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, taking advantage of these.
Please expand that a little.
Yeah, taking advantage of these well-formed and well-organized distribution networks where we can partner a packaging of programs on with a large group like the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or Boys and Girls Clubs of America, where they have an existing distribution channel and network to reach tens of thousands of kids in some instances, is a fantastic multiplier. One of the other important items, and we addressed it earlier when we talked about the need for a more effective and more rigorous evaluation system. Certainly we have a lot of anecdotal evidence that our programming is impactful, and reach is important. Reaching 2 million kids and 2 million people and educators is a very important quantifying metric, but we must maintain high quality programming so that we're having impactful results and lasting results. And that's an important goal for this current year that we're in right now, is to develop this more standardized and rigorous evaluation technique to ensure that we are making a difference. I think, as we all know, reaching out to kids at a young age in the world of STEM is of national importance right now. It's of national importance for us on an economic and even world political security from standpoint. So as a national laboratory, I think it's incumbent on us to respond to that national importance and try to service and help.
Thank you. And I would like to thank all the people who have contributed questions. That's an important part of this meeting. And it is time that we really have to, I think, close. And we indicated that. We're trying to do everything on time, including closing. However, we do want to deal with your questions in the best way possible. So those of you who still have questions, or perhaps you even think of one driving home or something like that, I would give you, and Brian, would you give us repeat for us the right email, so that if they send them in, we'll do our very best to respond just as quickly as possible. Brian?
Yes, you can send them to events at
iss-casis.org.
Okay. So we welcome your questions, but more, we welcome all of your participation. We thank you, and we'll see you again, I hope, next year, along with others. We expect it'll have to be a much bigger building by then. Thank you.